Okay, welcome to lesson 26. So in this lesson we have something new called for loop. What is a for loop? It's like while loop, an iterative structure. So if you want to iterate through a sequence, a list, string, a tuple, so you can use a for loop. Now let's take a look at the general syntax of for loop. So first you have to write for in lowercase letters, and then you need a variable. So it's really common to use I, J, K, but you're not restricted to use I. You can use any other variable, any other name. And then we have in, the keyword in. Now we have a built-in function named range. So here you can have one parameter, two parameters, or three parameters. But for now, let's have two parameters, x and y. And here you will have some statements. So hopefully you remember. So whenever we have colon and then you enter, you need indentation. So these are indentation. So this I is your variable and range is the built-in function. Or sometimes you might hear predefined function. So whatever you have here inside, or let's say under for loop, is the body of for loop. So everything here belongs to for loop. Now let's talk about range function in details. So let's have range and then 10, 200. So here we have the lower limit and the upper limit. So it's like slicing. The lower limit is always inclusive and the upper limit is always exclusive. I told you we have three parameters. We can have three parameters. The third one is step size. If you don't mention step size, the range function uses 1 by default. So what are the numbers here? We have 10, 200. So from 10 until 200. So this one is exclusive. So it's not included. So we have 10, 11, 12. So we increase by 1 because step size is 1. Up to 199. So these are the numbers. Let's have another example. Range 5. So here we have one parameter, just 5. So this 5 here, or whenever you have one parameter, that parameter will be the upper limit or the exclusive one. So what about starting value? Is it 1? Is it minus 1? So whenever you have one value, like here, starting value is 0. So we start from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So be careful, you don't write 5, because this is the upper limit, which is exclusive. Now, how to use the for loop and built-in function range to iterate through a list or a sequence. So let's have a list with 5 elements, 10, 20, 30, 40, and 50. So we have 5 elements. For I in range, now we have 0, 5, colon, we need indentation, print. So I want to visit each element. I want to print each element of the list. Print. So it means I have to access the element from the list. The name of the list, square brackets. So what should I write inside square brackets? The index of the corresponding element, which is 0, which is 1, which is 2, which is 3. So you don't write 0, you don't write 1. So you have to write variable I, because its value changes. So I is 0, I is 1, I is 2, up to 4. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So once again, this number is inclusive and this one is exclusive. So what is the output? Simple, we have 10, 20, 30, 40, and 50. And here we have the indexes 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I equals 0, we have x0, I equals 1, we have x1, I equals 2, we have x2, I equals 3, we have x3, and the last one I equals 4, x4. So you don't need to increase the value of I. So it increases automatically, so no need to increase the value of I. Do we have another way? Yes. Again, for I in range, now let's have 5, colon, print xi. So as I told you, this one is the upper limit, which is exclusive. Now what is the output? The same as before, 10, 20, 30, 40, and 50. Now let's use for loop and len function. So I'm sure you all remember len function to get the length of a list or a sequence. The length means the number of elements. So now let's combine len and for loop. So we have for I in range, So here I'm going to use two parameters, lower limit and upper limit. And len function here, because it returns a positive integer. Len of x, yx, the name of the list. Column. And then print xi. So here we have 0, comma, len of x. So this is 0. What about len of x? This one is 5, because we have 5 elements. Once again, 0 is the lower limit, inclusive one, and len of x, which is 5, is the upper limit, the exclusive one. Now what about the output? 10, 20, 30, 40, and 50. So if you want to have all of them in one line, you can say end parameter equals empty string. Now let's have another way for I in range len of x, and then print xi. So as I told you before, whenever you have one parameter, it will be considered as the upper limit. Which is exclusive, right? And here we have 5, because we have 5 elements. So what is the output? 10, 20, 30, 40, and 50. So there is one nice feature about for loop. So no need to use indexes all the time. So you can omit indexes. You can say, okay, we have the first element, the second element, and the last element. So no need to refer to the indexes. So you can use the element itself. How? So you have 4, and then the variable. So I told you I is common, so I'm using I. You can use a different name, it doesn't matter. In. So far we've been working with range function. Now let's change it to something else. So let's omit range function. Now let's have the name of the list, x here. For I in x. And then print I. So you can see I'm not going to use x, I, or range function. Just this one, for I in x. So let's have our list. X equals, we had 10, 20, 30, 40, and 50, right? So for I in x, the first iteration, I becomes this element here, 10. So I equals 10. So be careful, I is not the index. I is the element itself. And then print I. We print 10, the value of I. Then I becomes this element, 20. So the second iteration, I is 20, print I, we print 20. Then I becomes this element, I becomes 40 and the last one, I becomes 50. So 10, 20, 30 and 40 and 50. 5 elements. So using this structure. So no need to use range function, no need to use indexes, just the variable and the name of the list. Let me write it here. Name of the list. So basically you're declaring I and initializing I. So I is a variable. So can I use I somewhere else in my code? Yes, you can. So let's say we have x equals, as an example, because many people do not mention like what happens after this for loop. What happens to I after this for loop? So we have 10, 30, 100. Now this is our list. I say for I in x print I, and let's have another print function out of for loop, print I plus 2, another one print I plus 10. And here I equals 0. Let's print I. So what we have here, we have a list named x and we have this variable. Now we have I. What is the initial value of I? The initial value of I is 10. Now we have declared and initialized I. So we print some numbers, 10, 20, 30. So I is this, and then I becomes 30 and I becomes 100. Not 30, let me change it to. So it was 10, 30 and 100. So I becomes 30 and I becomes 100. Now the value of I is 100. Is I limited to this part? No. So you can use I after for loop. So here you can see I don't have any indentation. So it means these 4 statements do not belong to for loop. So here we have indentation. Now what about this one, print I plus 2? What is the current value of I? The current value is 100. 100 plus 2, it becomes 102. What about this one, print I plus 10? What is the current value of I? The current value is 100. 100 plus 10, it becomes 110. So be careful, I'm not assigning anything to I. I'm just using the value plus another value. But here, I'm using assignment operator. So it means I'm changing the value of I. So I becomes 0, and then print I. You print the value of I, which is 0. So be careful, this I is not limited to this for loop. You can use I in other places in the code. So I think it's enough for this lesson. Let's finish it here. So next lesson we will continue with for loop. As usual, take care and bye-bye.